Ever felt like you're walking on eggshells, waiting for the next emotional storm to hit? One moment she's laughing, the next she's distant, leaving you scrambling to figure out what went wrong. Relationships can feel like navigating a ship through unpredictable waves, where her moods shift without warning, and you're left bracing for impact. It's exhausting, confusing, and downright frustrating. But what if there was a way to stay steady, no matter how turbulent the emotional seas get? That's where Stoicism comes in, a 2,000-year-old philosophy that's not about suppressing emotions, but mastering your response to them. Picture this: instead of reacting to every shift in her energy, you remain unshaken, grounded in a calm that diffuses tension before it even starts. The ancient Stoics weren't just theorists, they were warriors, leaders, and thinkers who faced chaos with unbreakable composure. And their wisdom is exactly what you need when her emotions feel like a roller coaster you didn't sign up for. This isn't about manipulation or detachment, it's about reclaiming your peace without needing her mood to change first. Imagine having 25 proven tools at your disposal, each designed to help you respond with patience, clarity, and even humor when emotions run high. Whether she's upset over something trivial or giving you the silent treatment, these strategies will keep you centered, turning potential conflicts into moments of connection. So why does this matter now? Because emotional turbulence isn't just a relationship challenge, it's a human one. We've all been there, caught off guard by someone else's intensity, reacting in ways we later regret. But Stoicism flips the script. It teaches you to see her emotions not as a threat, but as a test of your own resilience. And that's what we're diving into today, a toolkit forged by centuries of wisdom, ready to transform how you handle her highs and lows. By the end of this, you won't just survive the emotional roller coaster, you'll learn to ride it with a smirk, knowing nothing can shake your inner calm. Ready? Let's begin. Here's the first tool in your Stoic toolkit, what the ancients called the dichotomy of control. Picture this: she comes home upset after a long day, and suddenly her mood becomes your problem. You try fixing it, reassuring her, or worse, taking her frustration personally. But here's the truth: her emotions are not yours to control. The Stoics knew this better than anyone. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor who ruled Rome amid constant chaos, put it plainly: you have power over your mind, not outside events. That's the core of this principle. It's not about indifference, it's about recognizing where your influence begins and ends. Think of it like weatherproofing your mind. You can't stop the storm, but you can choose whether to stand outside getting drenched or step under shelter. When she's angry, distant, or emotional, that's her storm, not yours. Your job isn't to change the weather, but to decide how you'll respond to it. Maybe that means giving her space instead of prying for answers. Or listening without feeling pressured to fix her mood. The moment you stop tying your peace to her emotional state, something shifts. The tension eases because you're no longer fighting a battle you were never meant to win. This isn't just philosophy, it's practical freedom. Ever noticed how trying to micromanage someone else's feelings only leaves you drained? That's because frustration grows in the gap between what you want to control and what you can. The Stoic solution: focus on your reaction. Did she snap at you? You control whether you snap back or respond with patience. Did she shut down? You choose whether to escalate the silence or let it pass without taking it personally. Every interaction becomes cleaner, lighter, because you're no longer carrying the weight of her emotions on your shoulders. Now, here's where most men get stuck, mistaking care for control. Loving someone doesn't mean you're responsible for their happiness. That's a heavy and impossible burden. Stoicism teaches a healthier balance. Be present, be kind, but anchor yourself in what's yours to govern. Her bad day doesn't have to become yours. That's not cold, it's clarity. And ironically, this mindset often diffuses tension faster than any reassurance could. When she sees you steady, unshaken by her turbulence, it gives her the safety to calm down naturally. No ultimatums, no walking on eggshells, just quiet strength that keeps the ship upright, no matter how rough the waves get. Negative visualization might sound counterintuitive at first. Why would anyone willingly imagine things going wrong? But this Stoic practice isn't about pessimism, it's about inoculation. Think of it like a vaccine for your peace of mind. Seneca, the Stoic philosopher who advised emperors, put it bluntly, rehearse tragedy to disarm it. What does that look like in real life? Picture her angrily walking out after an argument. Instead of fearing that moment, you mentally walk through it beforehand. You see yourself staying calm, giving her space, and refusing to let her emotions dictate yours. By confronting the worst-case scenario in your mind, you strip it of its power to shock or derail you when it actually happens. Here's why this works. Our brains are wired to dread the unknown. When her mood swings hit unexpectedly, they feel catastrophic because we haven't prepared. But when you've already visualized handling her outbursts with steadiness, they become just another wave, not a tsunami. The ancient Stoics called this premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. It's not about expecting disaster, it's about being ready for whatever comes. Imagine two versions of yourself. One panics when she raises her voice, the other remains unshaken because you've already seen this moment play out a dozen times in your mind. Which version navigates the storm better? This practice has a surprising side effect: gratitude. When you mentally rehearse losing her walking away, the relationship ending, you suddenly notice how much you take for granted. That quiet morning together, the way she laughs at your dumb jokes, even the heat of an argument becomes a sign of passion rather than a threat. Seneca wrote, "What fortune has made yours is not your own." By facing the temporary nature of everything, you stop clinging so tightly to perfection. Her bad mood isn't a crisis, it's a reminder that today, right now, you still have the chance to choose how you respond. Try this tonight. Spend 5 minutes sitting with your eyes closed, imagining the emotional scenarios you usually dread. She gives you the silent treatment. Visualize yourself giving her the grace to feel it without needing to fix it. She criticizes you unfairly. See yourself pausing instead of reacting, asking what's really bothering you. With genuine curiosity, the goal isn't to dwell on negativity but to train your reflexes. When you've already lived through these moments in your mind, the real thing loses its edge. You'll catch yourself thinking, this again. I know how this goes, and that's when you realize you're no longer a passenger on her emotional roller coaster. You're the one holding the safety bar, steady and smiling, because nothing she throws at you is a surprise anymore. The brilliance of negative visualization isn't just in weathering storms, it's in rediscovering calm waters you didn't know were there. Her emotions become less threatening when you've already made peace with them in advance. And that's the secret. By preparing for the worst, you free yourself to enjoy the present without fear. Amor Fati, Latin for love of fate, sounds noble in theory, but how do you apply it when she's crying over something that seems trivial or raging about a problem you can't solve? This is where Stoicism shifts from philosophy to superpower. Nietzsche, who built on Stoic ideas, put it best: don't just bear what's necessary, love it. That doesn't mean you enjoy her outbursts, but you start seeing them as fuel for your own growth. Every emotional storm she brings is a chance to practice patience, to strengthen your empathy, or to test your ability to stay grounded. Think of a blacksmith tempering steel. The metal doesn't become strong because it avoids the fire. It's hammered and heated repeatedly until it's unbreakable. Her emotions are your fire. When she's upset, instead of resisting or resenting it, ask yourself, what can this moment teach me? Maybe it's a lesson in listening without needing to fix things. Or a reminder that her moods aren't about you. Even frustration becomes useful when you realize it's highlighting your own expectations, the silent demands you've placed on her to be predictable, cheerful, or easy. Amor Fati flips the script. Her unpredictability isn't a flaw. It's the very thing that sharpens your resilience. Consider Marcus Aurelius jotting notes to himself during wars and plagues. The obstacle is the way. Her emotional whirlwinds are obstacles, yes, but they're also the path to becoming unshakable. Take the silent treatment, for example. Most men panic or push harder for resolution. But what if you saw her withdrawal as a chance to practice self-sufficiency, to sit with discomfort without scrambling to fill the silence, or her criticism instead of defending yourself? Could you mine it for a grain of truth, even if poorly delivered? Loving fate means extracting value from every interaction, especially the messy ones. Here's the paradox: when you stop resisting her emotions, they lose their power to destabilize you. A tantrum becomes a test of your humor. A tearful moment turns into an opportunity to connect without drowning in her sadness. Amor Fati isn't passive acceptance, it's active engagement with reality as it is, not as you wish it were. And that's where real freedom lies, when her roller coaster no longer dictates your peace, but becomes the ride you learn to appreciate for the strength it builds in you. Try this reframe next time chaos strikes. Instead of thinking, "Why is she like this?" ask, "What's this revealing about me?" Her storms mirror your unresolved edges, the need for control, the fear of conflict, the discomfort with vulnerability. Amor Fati turns her emotions into your teacher, and the more you love the lessons, even when they're hard, the quieter the roller coaster gets. Not because she changes, but because you've learned to ride it with your eyes open, grateful for the turbulence that makes you steadier in the end. Ever noticed how quickly a heated moment can spiral? She says something sharp, and before you know it, you're locked in a battle of words, both of you saying things you don't mean. This is where Stoicism introduces a game-changing concept: the gap. Between what happens and how you respond, there's a sliver of space, and in that space lies all your power. The Stoics called this prosody the discipline of attention. It's not about suppressing your reaction, it's about inserting a moment of choice where impulse used to rule. Picture this: she snaps at you after a long day. Your instinct is to snap back to match her energy. But what if instead you took just 3 seconds? 1, 2, 3. That tiny pause is enough to short-circuit the autopilot reaction. Epictetus, the former slave-turned-philosopher, put it bluntly: it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. Those 3 seconds let you switch from reacting like a reflex to responding like a leader. And here's the secret: it's in that pause that she'll often catch herself too. Emotional chaos thrives on immediacy. When you refuse to play along, the tension loses its fuel. Journaling takes this even deeper. Grab a notebook after a tense moment and ask yourself, what part of that reaction was really about her, and what part was my own unfinished business? Maybe her criticism stung because it tapped into your own doubts, or her silence felt like rejection because of an old wound. Writing forces clarity, turning messy emotions into something you can hold at arm's length and examine. Marcus Aurelius filled pages with these kinds of reflections, not to dwell on negativity, but to master his own mind. When you journal, you're not just venting, you're training yourself to spot patterns, to separate her emotions from your triggers. The magic of the gap isn't just in avoiding fights, it's in discovering what's underneath them. That pause might reveal she wasn't even angry at you, just stressed about work and needing a listening ear. Or that your knee-jerk defensiveness comes from a place of fearing inadequacy, not her actual words. Stoicism teaches that every emotional reaction is a message, but most of us are too busy reacting to read it. The pause turns you into a detective of your own mind, uncovering the real stakes behind the surface-level drama. Try this today. Commit to the 3-second rule. Next time her mood shifts, let your first response be silence, not the cold, punishing kind, but the quiet of someone choosing their move deliberately. Watch how often she mirrors your calm instead of escalating, and if the moment passes without conflict, that's not a win by accident. It's the result of wielding the gap like a stoic, turning what could have been a collision into nothing more than a near miss. The more you practice, the wider that gap becomes, until eventually you'll find yourself living in it, that spacious place where reactions become responses and emotional roller coasters become just another ride you know how to navigate. When emotions run high and her reaction feels like the end of the world, there's a Stoic technique that cuts through the noise like a telescope pointed at the stars. They called it the view from above, a mental shift where you pull back and ask one simple question: will this even matter in a year? Epictetus trained his students to do this by imagining themselves rising above their problems, seeing their lives from the vastness of the cosmos. Suddenly, that argument about who forgot to take out the trash shrinks to a speck. The silent treatment feels less like a catastrophe and more like a fleeting ripple in time. This isn't about dismissing her feelings, it's about reclaiming clarity. Think of it like stepping onto a balcony during a crowded party. Down in the noise, every word feels urgent, every glance loaded. But from above, you see patterns. Her outburst isn't just anger, it's exhaustion or stress from work or fear of something unrelated to you. The cosmic viewpoint dissolves pettiness because it forces you to confront how small most conflicts really are. Marcus Aurelius wrote reminders to himself like this: think of the whole universe, how brief the moment of your existence is. When you zoom out, you stop misstoring battles over territory that won't even exist in the grand scheme of your relationship. Here's how to practice it in real time. Next time tension flares, close your eyes for just 3 seconds and picture the two of you from space. Two tiny figures on a pale blue dot, tangled in a momentary drama. Does the shirt left on the floor still warrant World War III? Probably not. This exercise works because it engages your brain's prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for rational thought, bypassing the amygdala's panic response. It's not avoidance, it's strategic perspective. The irony, the view from above doesn't just minimize conflicts, it heightens what actually matters. When trivial fights fade, you're left with the real stakes: trust, respect, love. The things that will matter in a decade. Epictetus knew this when he told his students to let go of what's not yours to carry. Her bad mood isn't yours. The unresolved argument from last Tuesday, likely forgotten by next month, but how you show up in those moments, steady, compassionate, unshaken by temporary storms, that's what leaves a mark. Try this tonight before reacting to her emotions. Mentally fast forward a year. Visualize looking back at this moment. Will you remember what sparked the tension or just how you handled it? The view from above isn't magic, it's deliberate perspective, and the more you use it, the more natural it becomes to navigate her roller coaster, not as a frantic passenger, but as someone who knows exactly how short the ride really is. Empathy might seem at odds with Stoicism at first glance. After all, doesn't ignoring emotions make you cold and detached? But the Stoics weren't emotionless statues. They practiced something far more nuanced: empathy as a disciplined choice. Hierocles, a lesser-known but brilliant Stoic thinker, introduced the idea of the circles of concern, a series of concentric rings representing our connections from self to family to humanity. His point, justice in the Stoic sense, begins with recognizing that her emotions aren't an intrusion on your peace. They're part of the shared human experience you're woven into. Picture this: she's venting about her chaotic day, and your instinct is to problem solve or retreat. But what if you paused and asked, what's it like to stand in her shoes right now? Not to fix, not to judge, just to witness. The Stoics called this sympatheia, the understanding that we're all bound together, and another's pain is never truly separate from our own. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "What harms the hive harms the bee." When she's struggling, it's not her problem. It's an opportunity to exercise the Stoic virtue of justice, treating her inner world with the same respect you demand for yours. Here's where most men miss the mark. They either drown in her emotions, sacrificing their own stability, or wall themselves off entirely. Stoicism offers a third path: compassionate detachment. You don't have to catch her anger like a cold, but you can acknowledge it without resistance. Think of it like watching a storm from a sturdy porch. You see the rain, you hear the thunder, but you're not out there getting soaked. This balanced approach honors hierarchical circles close enough to care, but centered enough not to lose yourself. Try this reframe next time she's upset. Instead of thinking, how do I make this stop? Ask, what's she teaching me about the human condition? Maybe her frustration mirrors your own unspoken stress. Maybe her tears reveal a depth of feeling you've been too busy to notice. Empathy, in the Stoic sense, isn't about merging with her emotions. It's about expanding your perspective to include them. And that shift, more than any quick fix, is what builds bridges instead of barriers. The irony, when she feels truly seen, her emotional storms often quiet on their own. Not because you handled her, but because you stopped treating her feelings as a threat to your peace. Justice, as the Stoics defined it, means giving her inner world the dignity of your attention without demanding it change to suit you. And that's where real strength lies, not in avoiding emotions, but in meeting them with the steady warmth of someone who understands that her roller coaster is just part of the ride you're on together. Journaling might seem like something reserved for poets or teenagers with lockable diaries, but the Stoics turned it into a weapon for emotional mastery, especially when navigating her storms. Picture this: after a heated argument, instead of replaying the fight in your head or venting to a friend, you take 10 minutes to write down exactly what happened, her words, your reactions, even the tension in the room. But here's the twist: you're not just scribbling complaints. Like Marcus Aurelius, whose personal journals became the bedrock of meditations, you're hunting for patterns. What triggers her outbursts? What triggers your reactions? Over time, those pages reveal something startling. Her emotional roller coaster isn't random, and neither are your responses. Marcus didn't journal to wallow, he did it to distill chaos into lessons. In one entry, he chastises himself. You're just upset because your own expectations got dashed again. Sound familiar? When she snaps over something minor, it's easy to blame her mood swings. But your journal might show you're equally rattled because you expected her to be cheerful, an unspoken demand that set you both up for friction. The ink doesn't lie, her outbursts are only half the story. The other half is your unexamined rules about how she should behave. Try this template tonight. Divide your page into 3 columns: what happened, how I reacted, and the truth beneath. In the first, stick to facts: she criticized my cooking. In the second, note your emotional reflex: I shut down and left the room. But the third column is where Stoic wisdom kicks in. Ask, what's this really about? Maybe her criticism wasn't about the overcooked pasta, but the fact she's drowning at work and needed to feel control somewhere. Or maybe your walkout wasn't about her words, but an old wound from being mocked as a kid. Journals turn emotional firefights into archaeological digs. Every layer reveals another clue. The real power: distance. In the moment, her emotions feel like a tidal wave, but writing them down forces you to slow the tape. You start noticing that her silent treatments usually follow stressful Mondays. That your defensiveness flares when she mentions her ex, not because of jealousy, but because it taps into your fear of not measuring up. Seneca called this stepping outside yourself, the ability to observe your life like a historian rather than a prisoner of the present. And when you spot these patterns, something shifts. You stop taking her storms personally because you've mapped the weather systems behind them. Don't just document the explosions, track the aftermath. Note how long it took you to regain calm. Whether your usual coping strategies, distraction, jokes, withdrawal, actually worked or just delayed the reckoning. Marcus wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." Your journal exposes that dye job. If every conflict leaves you resentful, the problem isn't just her moods, it's how you're processing them. But here's the hope: patterns once seen can be broken. The next time she spirals, you'll catch yourself thinking, this script again. And that's when you flip it, not by changing her, but by choosing a different response from the one your journal warned you about. The Stoics knew this truth. We don't learn from experience, we learn from reflecting on experience. Her emotional whirlwinds will keep coming, but with a journal in hand, you're no longer a bystander, you're a strategist, decoding the battlefield until even the fiercest storms start to make sense. There's a powerful Stoic exercise that feels like emotional armor, one that prepares you not just to survive her storms, but to walk through them untouched. It's called premeditatio malorum, Latin for the premeditation of evils, but don't let the dramatic name fool you. This isn't about doom-scrolling through worst-case scenarios. It's about rehearsing your composure so thoroughly that when chaos hits, you're already fluent in staying calm. Seneca, the Stoic heavyweight who advised Nero, one of history's most volatile rulers, wrote extensively about this. In one letter, he posed a radical question: why should I fear what I've already conquered in my mind? Imagine this: she's had a terrible day, and the moment she walks through the door, you can feel the tension radiating off her. Most men panic here, bracing for impact or scrambling to fix her mood. But if you've practiced premeditatio malorum, your brain has already been here 100 times. You've visualized her snapping, you've felt the heat of irrational criticism, you've even pictured her walking out mid-argument. And in every mental rehearsal, you saw yourself doing the same thing, breathing, staying grounded, refusing to let her emotions hijack yours. When the real moment arrives, it's not a crisis, it's a drill you've already aced. Seneca called this rehearsing adversity in advance. He didn't do it to dwell on negativity, but to strip fear of the unknown from life's challenges. Think of it like a firefighter running simulations. The alarm rings, and instead of freezing, they move with precision because they've trained for this exact scenario. Your relationship is no different. When you've mentally walked through her emotional outbursts, they lose their power to shock you. You start noticing patterns. Maybe her anger peaks when she's exhausted, or her silence is a plea for space, not punishment. Premeditatio malorum turns chaos into predictability. Here's the twist: this practice doesn't just harden you against her emotions, it softens your response to them. By confronting the worst in your imagination, you often realize how small it really is. That thing you feared she'd say, you've already heard it in your mind, and it didn't destroy you. The scenario you dreaded, you've already navigated it with stoic calm. Suddenly, real-life tension feels like a rerun, not a live emergency. Seneca put it best: he who has anticipated the coming of troubles takes away their power when they arrive. Try this tonight. Close your eyes and vividly imagine her at her most emotionally volatile, yelling, crying, shutting down. Now watch yourself in that scene like a film director. How does the steady version of you respond? Maybe you offer a simple "I hear you" instead of arguing. Maybe you give her space instead of chasing resolution. The goal isn't to expect disaster, but to dissolve its sting. When you've already lived through the storm in your mind, the real thing feels like just another passing cloud. The brilliance of premeditatio malorum is that it doesn't just prepare you for her chaos, it reveals how much of it was never yours to carry. Her moods become weather patterns you observe, not storms you're required to weather. And that's the ultimate Stoic shift. From reacting to her turbulence to recognizing it as just another chance to practice the unshakable calm you've been rehearsing all along. Memento mori, the ancient Stoic practice of remembering death, sounds morbid until you realize its real purpose. Not to paralyze you with fear, but to clarify what deserves your energy. Picture this: she's upset over something trivial, a missed text, a thoughtless comment, and you feel that familiar frustration bubbling up. Now hit pause. Ask yourself one jarring question: if today were my last day, would I want this to be our final exchange? That's the power of memento mori. It's not about dwelling on endings, it's about using life's brevity as a lens to magnify what truly matters. Marcus Aurelius kept a skull on his desk as a visceral reminder: you could leave life right now. That's the urgency the Stoics channeled, not for panic but for precision. When her emotions flare, this perspective slices through the noise. That argument about chores, the silent treatment over a forgotten errand, measured against the finite time you actually have together, they're not just small, they're insignificant. The Stoics weren't preaching detachment from life. They were demanding you engage with it fully by refusing to waste moments on pettiness. Here's the paradox: confronting mortality doesn't numb you to her emotions, it deepens your presence in them. Imagine holding her after a tearful outburst, not with impatience, but with the awareness that this very moment, raw and messy, is one you'll one day ache to relive. Even her mood swings become gifts when viewed through this lens. Seneca wrote, "Life is long if you know how to use it." Memento mori turns her fleeting storms into reminders to savor the imperfect, human parts of love before they slip away. Try this reframe next time tension rises. Before reacting, visualize standing at her funeral, looking back on this conflict. What would the future you regret more, that she overreacted or that you chose pride over connection? This isn't about guilt, it's about liberation. When petty battles lose their stakes, what remains is startlingly simple: the chance to love her as she is, not as you wish she'd be. The Stoics knew this secret, that remembering death isn't morbid. It's the key to living without petty resentments, so when the end does come, you're left with no wasted moments to mourn. History remembers Cotto the Younger not for his political victories, but for how he stood when everything crumbled around him. While rivals screeched insults and threats, he remained motionless, literally. During one infamous Senate speech, his opponent Quintus Hortensius grew so enraged he yanked Cotto's toga, trying to physically drag him from the podium. Cotto didn't flinch. He kept speaking as if nothing had happened, his calm so unnerving that Hortensius later collapsed in exhaustion. This is the power of role-modeled composure. When you refuse to mirror chaos, the chaos often exhausts itself trying to get a reaction from you. Now picture applying this to your relationship. She's upset, maybe even lashing out unfairly. Your instinct is to match her intensity, to defend, explain, or escalate. But what if, like Cotto, you became the unshakable presence that refuses to be pulled into the storm? Stoicism teaches that emotions are contagious, but so is calm. When you embody steadiness, you're not just managing your own state, you're offering her nervous system an alternative to chaos. Neuroscience confirms this. The human brain has mirror neurons that unconsciously mimic the emotional tone of those around us. Your composure isn't passive, it's a silent invitation for her to descend from the emotional ledge. Cotto's secret wasn't suppression, it was perspective. He viewed political attacks as tests of his principles, not personal assaults. Apply that lens to her criticism. When she snaps, you never listen. The untrained mind hears an indictment and fires back. The Stoic mind asks, is there truth here worth examining? Maybe she's expressing a valid need poorly. Maybe her tone stems from exhaustion, not contempt. By refusing to take the bait, you create space for something remarkable. The moment she catches herself, like Hortensius realizing his tantrum couldn't move Cotto, she'll often pause when her outburst meets quiet resolve instead of resistance. This isn't about becoming an emotionless statue. True Stoic calm has warmth, what the ancients called euthymia, a serene cheerfulness. Picture a nurse handling an agitated patient. They don't absorb the panic, but they don't coldly dismiss it either. They steady the room with grounded presence. That's the balance to strike. When her emotions surge, respond with the kind of calm that says, "I see you're upset, and we'll get through this," rather than withdrawing or amplifying the tension. Practical tip: borrow Cotto's posture literally. Next time conflict brews, notice your body. Are your shoulders hunched forward, jaw clenched? Stoics' new physical presence shapes mental state. Stand or sit like someone who isn't braced for impact. Breathe as if you're inhaling patience. She may not consciously register these cues, but her nervous system will. Like a tree standing firm in high winds, your stability gives her something to lean against when her own balance falters. The deepest lesson from Cotto. His calm wasn't for show, it was a declaration of values. By refusing to engage petty attacks, he revealed what truly mattered to him. Your composed presence during her storms does the same. It whispers, what's between us is bigger than this moment, and that silent message, repeated consistently, becomes the bedrock she'll learn to trust, even when her emotions temporarily forget. She says something sharp, and your first thought is, how could she speak to me like that? That split-second interpretation, not her words themselves, is what determines whether this becomes a battle or a breakthrough. Epictetus nailed it 2,000 years ago. People are not disturbed by things, but by the views they take of them. Here's the Stoic secret: her emotional outbursts are almost never about you. Their distress signals, messy, misdirected, but rooted in pain, not malice. The moment you stop hearing attacks and start hearing cries for help, the entire dynamic shifts. Think of it like a dog snarling because it's trapped under a fence. The barks aren't aggression, they're fear. Her "you never listen" might feel like an accusation, but reframed through a Stoic lens, it's "I feel unheard." The words are the surface noise, the unmet need is the real message. Marcus Aurelius practiced this daily, writing reminders like, when people injure you, ask yourself, what made them do that? He wasn't excusing bad behavior, he was disarming it by understanding its roots. Your girlfriend's sharp tone isn't a verdict on your worth, it's the overflow of her own unresolved stress, exhaustion, or insecurity. This reframing takes practice because our brains are wired to take things personally. Evolution trained us to detect threats, not decode subtext. But here's the hack: insert a mental question mark between her words and your reaction. When she sighs, forget it, you wouldn't understand. Instead of hearing dismissal, ask, what's the hurt behind that? Maybe she's been burned before by sharing vulnerably. Maybe she's protecting herself because she expects to be let down. The Stoics called this hypolepsis, the discipline of withholding judgment until you've examined all angles. Try this tonight. After a tense exchange, replay her words in your mind, but this time, imagine she's saying them through tears rather than gritted teeth. How does "I'm fine" sound different when you picture her wiping her eyes while saying it? Even her sarcasm often masks helplessness. Epictetus trained his students to see insults as misguided attempts to cope. When someone speaks harshly, think, they must think this is the right thing to do. That doesn't mean tolerating abuse, but recognizing that her worst moments are usually cries for connection, however garbled. The real test comes when you respond not to her words, but to the pain beneath them. Instead of "why are you being like this?" try "that sounded really upsetting, tell me more." Watch how often her defensiveness crumbles when met with this kind of clarity. It's not about being a doormat, it's about being the lighthouse in her storm, steady enough to see through the waves to the wounded ship beneath. And that's the ultimate Stoic shift, from reacting to her surface chaos to responding to the human underneath, who's just as lost in the tempest as you sometimes feel. You know that feeling when she's upset, and your first instinct is to fix it, to smooth things over, to make the discomfort disappear as fast as possible. What if the real solution wasn't avoiding the discomfort, but learning to sit with it voluntarily? Enter voluntary discomfort, one of the most counterintuitive yet powerful Stoic practices. Musonius Rufus, the Stoic teacher who trained Epictetus, put it bluntly: hardship is the best trainer. He wasn't talking about masochism. He was describing resilience built through small, deliberate acts of self-denial. Skip dessert tonight, take a cold shower, leave your phone behind for an hour. These aren't punishments, they're rehearsals for the emotional spikes you'll face when her mood swings hit. Think of it like muscle memory. When you've practiced sitting with minor discomforts, hunger, boredom, even the itch to check notifications, you're training your brain to tolerate bigger emotional waves without panicking. Her sudden anger or withdrawal becomes just another form of discomfort you've already learned to navigate. Musonius famously lived in poverty by choice, not because he enjoyed suffering, but because he knew something vital: what we avoid, we fear. What we face, we master. When you willingly embrace small hardships, you're immunizing yourself against the shock of her emotional storms. Here's how this plays out in real life. Say she gives you the silent treatment. Normally, that void of communication would gnaw at you, pushing you to beg for resolution or spiral into overthinking. But if you've spent evenings practicing not filling silence, sitting alone without distractions, letting boredom settle in, you'll recognize this same skill applies. The discomfort of her silence isn't a crisis, it's just another chance to exercise your tolerance. Or when she criticizes you unfairly, instead of reflexively defending yourself, you lean into the sting. You've already practiced this by tolerating cold water or skipping your morning coffee. The criticism becomes another drop in the bucket of voluntary discomforts you've willingly carried. The brilliance of this practice is its simplicity. You don't need grand gestures, just tiny, consistent denials. Walk instead of driving, wear a slightly uncomfortable shirt. Resist the urge to snack when boredom hits. Each time you're sending your nervous system a message. Discomfort won't break you, and when her emotional waves come, that message echoes back. You'll catch yourself thinking, this is just another cold shower, not pleasant but survivable, even transformative. Musonius taught that hardship strips away our illusions of control. When you voluntarily face discomfort, you stop expecting life or her to be perpetually smooth. You start seeing her moods for what they are, passing weather, not personal attacks. And that shift changes everything. The less you fear discomfort, the less her emotional spikes throw you off balance. You become the steady presence she can rely on, not because you're suppressing your reactions, but because you've already befriended the very sensations that used to unnerve you. Try this today. Pick one small comfort to surrender. Leave the heater off during your morning routine. Drink your coffee black. Sit quietly for 5 minutes without reaching for your phone. Notice the urge to escape the discomfort and then stay anyway. That's the Stoic edge. When you've already chosen hardship, the hardships life chooses for you lose their bite. And her roller coaster, it's just another ride you've trained for. Take a deep breath right now, slow, steady, filling your belly like a balloon. Feel that. That's not just oxygen hitting your bloodstream. It's the most overlooked Stoic superpower you already carry. Cleans, the philosopher who literally hauled water by night to fund his studies by day, called breath the thread of life, not just because it keeps us alive, but because it's the invisible leash that can pull you back from the edge when her emotions threaten to drag you under. Picture this, she's mid-rant, voice sharp, hands flying, the kind of moment where your pulse spikes and your jaw clenches on instinct. This is where most men either match her intensity or shut down. But the Stoics, they'd do something radical, nothing, or more precisely, they'd breathe. Not the shallow, panicked gulps of someone bracing for impact, but the deliberate, diaphragm-deep rhythm cleans practiced as he scrubbed floors between lectures. He knew what modern science confirms. Controlled breathing activates the vagus nerve, flipping your nervous system from fight or flight to rest and digest in real time. That sigh she misinterprets as indifference. It's actually your body hitting the brakes before the argument crashes. Here's how to wield this thread like a Stoic. Next time tension flares, drop your attention to your ribs. Breathe in for 4 counts, not through your chest, but deep into your lower belly, like pouring water to the bottom of a vase. Hold for 4, exhale for 6, imagining the heat of reaction leaving with each second. Cleans didn't just preach this, he lived it. When critics mocked his humble labor, he didn't lash out, he breathed through the insult, then replied with humor so disarming his detractors became students. That's the alchemy of the Stoic breath. It turns her chaos into your compost, fueling growth instead of fires. The magic isn't in avoiding the reaction, it's in creating space to choose it. Between her sharp word and your response, there's a gap. Breath widens it. Try this tonight when she's upset. Make your first act of leadership inhaling audibly enough that she hears it. Not as a dramatic sigh, but as a signal to yourself and to her that what comes next won't be reactive but intentional. Ancient texts describe Clean's breathing as visible, a rhythmic anchor his students could sink to during debates. Your breath can be that anchor too, steadying both of you when emotions run high. And here's the twist no one tells you: breathing like this isn't passive. It's a silent protest against the hurry of modern love. When you slow your breath, you reject the lie that conflict must be resolved now, that her mood demands immediate fixing. Clean's thread isn't just for survival. It's a loom weaving patience into every strained moment. The more you practice between crises, the more instinctive it becomes during them. Soon, you'll catch yourself breathing through minor irritations before they escalate, not because you're avoiding emotion, but because you've trained your body to process it without self-sabotage. So let her next storm come. While she's caught in the gust, you'll be the oak rooted not in stubbornness but in quiet rhythm. Inhale 4, hold 4. Exhale 6, repeat until the world stills. That's the Stoic secret. The thread of life is also the rope that pulls you both back to shore. And all you have to do is remember it's there, woven into the very flesh of your diaphragm, waiting to be used. Marcus Aurelius once wrote about a general who hurled insults at him during a war council, not in private, but in front of Rome's entire command staff. The emperor's response: he burst out laughing, not the forced chuckle of someone masking anger, but genuine amusement at the absurdity of the moment. That's Stoic humor in action, not a weapon to mock, but armor to deflect. When her emotions spiral, whether she's ranting about traffic or giving you the cold shoulder over a misplaced dish, a well-timed joke delivered with warmth can be the pressure valve that stops tension from exploding. But there's a razor-thin line between wit that disarms and sarcasm that wounds. The difference lies in intent. Sarcasm says you're being ridiculous. Humor says this moment doesn't have to own us. Picture her stewing after a bad day, arms crossed, glaring at her phone. A sarcastic wow, someone woke up on the wrong side of the bed, pours gasoline on the fire. But a playful, is this the part where I dramatically apologize for whatever I definitely did, spoken with a grin, does something unexpected. It mirrors her mood back to her without judgment, giving her just enough distance to see its temporary nature. The Stoics called this apatheia, not apathy, but the freedom that comes when you stop mistaking passing storms for permanent climate. Marcus didn't laugh at that general to humiliate him. He laughed because he genuinely found the outburst unimportant. That's the key. Humor fails when it's a covert attack or a way to avoid genuine connection. But when it springs from lightness, from the Stoic recognition that most conflicts are fleeting dramas we've assigned too much weight, it becomes a bridge. Think of the last time you stubbed your toe and cursed, only to laugh about it an hour later. Emotional spikes follow the same arc. A well-placed quip can fast forward past the worst of it, reminding her and you that this too shall pass. Try this next time she's spiraling over something minor. A burnt meal, a cancelled plan. Respond with absurdity instead of logic. Well, I guess we'll have to add survive the great pancake disaster to our shared list of traumas. The goal isn't to dismiss her feelings, but to gently spotlight their scale. Often, she'll catch the ridiculousness herself and pivot if she doesn't. That's your cue to switch gears to empathy. Stoic humor isn't a one-size-fits-all solution. It's a diagnostic tool. When she laughs, you've dissolved the tension. When she doesn't, you've learned this storm runs deeper than it seemed. The brilliance of this approach, it doesn't just diffuse her emotions, it trains your resilience. Every time you choose laughter over frustration, you're reinforcing Marcus's lesson. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Her moods become less threatening when you've practiced meeting them with a smirk rather than a scowl. And over time, something unexpected happens. She starts mirroring your lightness, not because you demanded it, but because you proved it's possible to weather her storms without drowning in them. Here's the ultimate test. Can you make yourself laugh mid-argument? Not at her, but at the situation, at the sheer human comedy of two people who love each other arguing over who left the milk out. That's Stoic humor at its finest, an inside joke with the universe, reminding you both that even emotional roller coasters are just rides you can choose to enjoy. Silence isn't empty space, it's the canvas where wisdom paints its best work. Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, famously observed that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, and that ratio isn't just anatomical, it's instructional. When her emotions erupt, the instinct to fill the air with explanations, defenses, or reassurances can feel irresistible. But what if the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all? Strategic silence isn't passive, it's a deliberate choice to let the storm pass instead of trying to shout it down. Think of it like this: when a child throws a tantrum, the worst response is to match their energy. The calm parent who waits out the storm without reacting teaches a far deeper lesson, one about stability, not suppression. The Stoics practiced this with surgical precision. When confronted with insults or irrational outbursts, they'd often respond with quiet attentiveness rather than immediate rebuttal. Why? Because reactive words come from ego, silence comes from sovereignty. Picture her venting after a stressful day, her words sharp with fatigue. Jumping in to correct or comfort might seem helpful, but it often escalates the tension. Now imagine saying nothing, just listening, nodding, letting her words land without deflection. That silence does something remarkable. It gives her the rare gift of feeling truly heard, not fixed. Seneca wrote letters advising his friends to let the first impulse pass before speaking. That gap between emotion and action is where silence becomes your ally, allowing you to respond from clarity rather than reflex. Here's where most men misunderstand silence. They equate it with indifference or worse, stonewalling. But Stoic silence isn't cold or punishing, it's spacious. It's the difference between ignoring her and giving her room to breathe. Consider the Japanese concept of ma, the intentional pause in conversation that allows meaning to resonate. In music, the rests between notes create rhythm. In conflict, the pauses between words often reveal more than the words themselves. When she snaps, you never listen, biting back with "I do listen." Locks you in a loop. Silence followed by a simple "tell me what you need me to hear" shifts the dynamic entirely. Zeno's insight about ears and mouths wasn't just about quantity, it was about priority. Listening first, truly listening, creates the conditions where your eventual words carry weight. The ancient Stoics trained in prosoch, the discipline of attention, which meant observing not just what was said, but the unmet needs beneath the words. You're always on your phone might really mean "I miss feeling connected to you." Silence gives you time to decode that. It's the ultimate power move. By refusing to engage in surface-level skirmishes, you force the conversation toward what actually matters. Try this the next time emotions run high. When she's upset, make your first act not speech but stillness. Count to 5 in your head while maintaining gentle eye contact. Notice how often she fills that silence with the real issue, the fear, insecurity, or longing hiding behind the initial complaint. And when you do speak, let your words be fewer and softer. The louder she gets, the quieter you become, not out of weakness, but because you've learned what the Stoics knew: the deeper the waters, the less they ripple. The paradox: strategic silence often speaks louder than any argument. It communicates confidence, that her emotions won't hijack your peace, that you're secure enough not to need the last word. And over time, something shifts. She starts matching your calm, not because you demanded it, but because you modeled it. That's the alchemy of Zeno's wisdom. When you master silence, you teach others how to hear themselves. And in that space, even the loudest storms eventually quiet. Gratitude isn't just lip service, it's a psychological reset button, especially when her moods make you question why you signed up for this ride. Seneca kept what he called a gratitude journal, not as some fluffy exercise, but as armor against life's inevitable frictions. Here's how this applies when her emotions feel like a minefield. Your brain naturally fixates on threats. That sharp tone, the eye roll, the sigh that lasts just a beat too long, they dominate your mental real estate unless you deliberately evict them. That's where gratitude anchors come in. Each night, list 3 things about her that made today better, no matter how small. Maybe it was how she laughed at your terrible joke this morning. The way she instinctively reached for your hand in the grocery store. Even something as simple as her making coffee before you woke up. These aren't just nice thoughts, they're counterweights to the emotional turbulence that otherwise tips the scales. The Stoics didn't practice gratitude because life was perfect, they did it because life wasn't. Seneca wrote his journals during exile, political betrayals, and chronic illness. He knew something we often forget: what you focus on expands. When you catalog her positive traits daily, you're not ignoring the hard parts, you're refusing to let them monopolize your perception. Think of it like balancing a set of scales. Her bad mood today, that's one side, but you've been stacking the other side with dozens of small, real moments where she showed up beautifully. The math becomes unavoidable. The good outweighs the temporary storms. Try this experiment for 1 week. Write down 3 things you appreciate about her before bed. Not generic compliments like she's kind, but specific moments. She texted me a meme she knew I'd laugh at during my meeting, or she noticed I was stressed and ran me a bath without asking. Here's what happens. First, you'll catch yourself actively looking for these moments throughout the day, training your brain to spot the gold amid the gravel. Second, when she does have an outburst, you'll have a reservoir of recent, concrete examples to remind you this isn't who she always is. Third, and this is the magic, you might start noticing her negative patterns peak when you've slipped on this practice. Gratitude anchors don't just change your mindset, they change the emotional weather between you. Seneca called gratitude the parent of all virtues because it forces us to confront a radical truth. Most of what irritates us about others is the shadow cast by our own selective attention. Her mood swings aren't the full picture, they're just the parts we've trained ourselves to zoom in on. The journal flips the lens, and here's the kicker. When she senses you're the kind of man who notices her quiet strengths, she often rises to meet that version of herself. Not because you guilted or demanded, but because you reflected back the best parts she sometimes forgets are there. So tonight, before you reach for your phone or close your eyes, reach for a notebook instead. Not tomorrow, not when things are peaceful now, especially now. Write 3 lines, not for her, for you. Because the Stoics knew a secret modern psychology confirms: you can't resent someone you consistently give thanks for. And that's how gratitude stops being a journal entry and starts being the lens that turns her emotional roller coaster into a ride you can appreciate for all its dips and turns. Ever notice how resentment builds in the pauses, those silent moments after an argument where you're waiting for her to make the first move toward peace? The Stoics saw this trap coming 2 millennia ago. Epictetus, the philosopher who transformed his enslavement into a masterclass on inner freedom, laid down a radical alternative. Don't explain what kind of person you want to be, show it. This is the discipline of action, where you break toxic stalemates not with words but with unexpected warmth. Picture the tension after a fight, the air thick with unspoken grievances. Now imagine walking into the room with 2 mugs of tea, handing her one without a speech. No groveling, no strings attached, just a simple act that says, "This matters more than my pride." That's Stoic kindness in motion, proactive, quiet, and utterly disarming. The genius of this approach, it bypasses the ego's favorite battleground. When you're hurt, waiting for an apology feels like justice. But the Stoics recognized a deeper truth. Resentment is a cage you lock yourself in. Epictetus taught that our power lies not in controlling others' actions, but in mastering our own. Making tea-post argument isn't about conceding fault. It's about refusing to let pettiness dictate your character. History remembers Marcus Aurelius not for how he demanded respect, but for how he gave it freely even to those who slighted him. His journals reveal a man who chose to act nobly, regardless of whether anyone noticed or reciprocated. That's the core of this discipline. Your actions become the standard, not the bargaining chip. Here's where most men miss the mark. They confuse kindness with weakness, fearing that initiating peace means losing. But Epictetus, who was physically crippled by his master's brutality, knew real strength isn't in stubbornness, it's in the courage to soften first. Think of a gardener watering a plant after accidentally snapping its stem. The plant didn't earn care, the gardener gives it because that's who he chooses to be. Your relationship works the same way. When you bring her coffee after a cold morning or pick up her favorite snack when she's stressed, you're not rewarding bad behavior. You're asserting that your kindness isn't conditional on her mood. Try this reframe. Every emotional clash is a chance to practice antilentio, the Stoic art of preemptive goodwill. Instead of tallying wrongs, ask, what's one small action I can take to dissolve this tension? Maybe it's restarting the laundry she forgot in the washer, or sending a meme when you know she's buried in work. These gestures work because they're stealthy. They sidestep the drama and appeal directly to her subconscious. Neuroscience shows that unexpected kindness triggers oxytocin, the bonding hormone, faster than any apology. Your silent tea offering does what words often can't. It reassures her nervous system that conflict doesn't mean abandonment. The discipline of action shines brightest when it's hardest, when she's icy after a disagreement, and everything in you wants to match that energy. That's your training ground. Epictetus compared life to a wrestling match where the opponent isn't the other person, but your own reactive instincts. The art of living, he said, is more like wrestling than dancing, because it requires you to stand ready and firm even against sudden attacks. Your proactive kindness is that firm stance, proof that her storms don't have to uproot your principles. And here's the secret payoff: action rewrites the script. Most relationship conflicts follow predictable patterns. She withdraws, you push, both dig in. But when you insert an unscripted act of care, you force a plot twist. She expects sulking, you bring breakfast in bed. She braces for retaliation, you've already folded her clothes. These actions don't just soothe the moment, they slowly teach her nervous system that conflict with you is safe, that even at its messiest, your connection won't fracture. The Stoics called this living your philosophy, not debating it over wine, but embodying it in the daily grind of love. So tomorrow, when tension lingers, resist the urge to wait it out. Be the one who moves first, not with grand gestures, but with the quiet confidence of someone who knows kindness isn't a concession, but a conquest. Epictetus put it best: first say to yourself what you would be, then do what you have to do. Your actions aren't just responses, they're declarations of who you are, regardless of who she's being in that moment. And nothing disarms an emotional roller coaster like a man who's already chosen his track. Steady, generous, and unshakably kind. There's a silent killer in relationships, the unspoken demand that her emotions resolve on your timetable. You know the drill, she's upset, and even if you say the right words, there's an underlying pressure for her to just calm down already. That invisible clock ticking in your head, that's not patience, it's control in disguise. The Stoics called this attachment to outcomes, and Arrian, the historian who preserved Epictetus' teachings, warned it's the fastest way to turn empathy into frustration. His notes describe a student who kept interrupting his wife's grief with solutions until Epictetus asked him point blank, "Do you comfort her to ease her pain or to ease your discomfort with her pain?" Brutal but revealing, this subtle distinction changes everything. Needing her to get over it isn't compassion, it's emotional impatience wearing a mask of concern. Imagine holding a crying child and whispering, "Hurry up and stop so I can feel better." That's essentially what happens when we rush her process, the Stoic alternative. Amor Fati meets detachment. Love the reality of her messy, imperfect emotional timeline as much as you claim to love her joy. Arrian recorded Epictetus' advice to a senator whose wife would withdraw for days after arguments. Stop treating her recovery like a negotiation. You wouldn't demand a broken bone heal faster because it inconveniences you. Here's the paradox: letting go of the outcome often speeds resolution. When she senses you're not anxiously monitoring her mood like a progress bar, the pressure to perform being okay evaporates. Think of it like sleep. The harder you try to fall asleep, the more it eludes you. Emotional recovery follows the same rule. Your detachment creates the space for her to organically find equilibrium. Marcus Aurelius modeled this with his rebellious son Commodus. Instead of fretting over his erratic behavior, Marcus focused solely on his own responses, writing in his journals, "The cucumber is bitter. Throw it away, brambles in the path, step around them," not indifference but acceptance that some things ripen or rot on their own schedule. Practical tip: next time she's upset, place a mental bet with yourself. I wonder how long this will take, not with resentment but curiosity, like tracking rain clouds passing. Notice when the urge to fix arises and instead say nothing. Make her a tea and walk away. Read a book in the same room without filling the silence. This does two things: it honors her process and it trains you to tolerate discomfort. A muscle the Stoics called apatheia, freedom from unhealthy emotional dependency. The irony: your detachment becomes the anchor she didn't know she needed. Just as trees don't panic when leaves fall, trusting they'll regrow in season, your calm assures her emotions aren't emergencies. Arrian's notes end with this gem. The master said, "He who clutches at the wave loses the ocean." Her temporary storm is just one wave in the vast sea of your connection. And the less you grasp at controlling it, the more you'll find yourself floating effortlessly in the depths where true partnership thrives. Your body speaks before your mouth does, especially when her emotions hit hurricane levels. Picture this: she's venting frustration, arms crossed, jaw tight, and without thinking, you mirror her posture, leaning back, crossing your own arms, maybe even tapping your foot. Congratulations, you've just turned a spark into a wildfire. The Stoics understood something modern psychology confirms. Posture isn't just an expression of emotion, it's a dial that can turn tension up or down. Epictetus, who taught from a stool to model humility, drilled his students on how to sit during debates because he knew the body steers the mind as much as the reverse. Start with your shoulders. When she's upset, roll them back deliberately, like you're making space for her energy without absorbing it. This isn't about puffing up in dominance, it's about creating an open channel. Research shows expanded postures, uncrossed arms, palms visible, reduce cortisol levels in both parties. Think of it like a traffic cop directing chaos. Your posture silently signals, "I'm not a threat, but I'm not retreating either." Contrast this with the defensive hunch most men default to: elbows tight, chin tucked, as if bracing for verbal shrapnel. That stance screams fight or flight, priming her nervous system to escalate. The Stoic alternative: stand like a harbor, not a fortress, steady enough to absorb waves without crumbling. Then there's the eyes, locking onto hers like an interrogator. Bad move, darting away like a guilty child. Worse, the Stoic rhythm is soft focus, holding her gaze just long enough to show presence, then briefly breaking to glance at her shoulder or hands. This mimics the natural pattern of relaxed conversation, diffusing the intensity without seeming dismissive. Zeno, who taught under a colonnade to emphasize openness, would remind students, the eyes are gates, not weapons. Use them to invite connection, not demand submission. Now, the micro movements: nodding too fast screams impatience, too slow reads as condescension. The sweet spot: slow, slight nods timed with her exhales, a subconscious cue that you're syncing with her rhythm. And here's the kicker: Stoics called this harmonia, the art of attuning without merging. When she gestures wildly, resist mirroring her intensity. Instead, match her energy at half speed. If she throws her hands up, respond with a calm palm-up gesture at waist level. This subtly anchors the interaction, pulling the emotional altitude down without her noticing. The magic lies in the contrast. Her crossed arms might scream back off, but your open posture whispers, "I'm here when you're ready." Defensiveness breeds defensiveness, stillness breeds stillness. Marcus Aurelius wrote of battling Germanic tribes not by matching their frenzy, but by holding formation so relentlessly that their chaos exhausted itself against his calm. Apply that to your next argument. When she's coiled tight, be the relaxed counterweight, not passive patient. The body leads the mind, and sooner or later, her shoulders will start to mirror yours, her breath matching your pace. That's Stoic body language in action, sculpting the space between you until even the stormiest emotions have room to settle. Imagine stepping outside of yourself during an argument, not to escape the tension, but to witness it like a historian documenting an event. That's the Stoic third-person trick, a mental pivot that transforms you from reactive participant to composed observer. Marcus Aurelius perfected this in Meditations, his private journal where he'd refer to himself as you, as if giving counsel to a separate person. When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, he'd write, a deliberate shift from I to you that created just enough distance to see clearly. Apply this mid-conflict. When she raises her voice, instead of thinking, I can't believe she's talking to me like this, try notice how his chest tightens as her tone sharpens. That subtle reframe doesn't negate your feelings. It gives you the objectivity to choose your response rather than being hijacked by reflexes. Here's why this works. Anger and hurt thrive on immediacy, the illusion that this moment, this fight, is all that exists. The third-person perspective shatters that illusion by inserting a buffer between stimulus and reaction. Psychologists call this self-distancing, and studies show it reduces emotional intensity while boosting wise reasoning. When you narrate the scene internally as she and he instead of you and me, you're doing what Marcus did on the battlefield, assessing the terrain before charging in. Picture him jotting notes amid war camps. You don't have to turn this into something. It doesn't have to upset you. That's not detachment, it's strategic clarity. Try this tonight. Next time tension flares, mentally hover near the ceiling like a documentary filmmaker. Watch the two of you, the way her hands gesture when frustrated, how your jaw clenches when defensive. Describe the scene silently in third person. He's crossing his arms now. She's repeating herself because she feels unheard. This zoomed-out view reveals patterns invisible from ground level. Maybe her anger peaks when she's interrupted. Maybe your defensiveness kicks in at certain trigger words. The third-person lens turns heat into data, giving you the chance to disrupt familiar scripts. Marcus didn't use this trick to avoid emotion, but to navigate it with precision. In one passage, he chastises his third-person self. Why are you straining so hard? Nothing is truly unbearable. That's the real power here, separating the raw sensation from the story you're telling about it. Her "you never listen" feels like an attack when you're inside the eye. From the outside, it's simply a statement born from her unmet need. The third-person trick isn't about dismissing your pain. It's about seeing it as part of a larger dynamic rather than the whole truth. And here's the unexpected bonus. This practice cultivates compassion for both of you. Watching the scene unfold as an observer, you'll start noticing the fragility beneath her anger, the fear behind your defensiveness. Marcus wrote, "Look beneath the surface. Let not the several qualities of a thing escape you." The third-person perspective is that deeper look. It's the pause where you realize her outburst isn't about the dishes left in the sink, but the exhaustion of feeling invisible. Or that your sharp reply came from a place of shame, not spite. So when her next storm rolls in, resist the urge to dive into the waves, step onto the shore instead. Narrate the winds, the tides, the two figures weathering the squall, not as enemies, but as humans doing their best with the tools they have. That's the Stoic shift, from being swept away by the current to reading the river's flow. And sometimes, just sometimes, when she sees you standing there calm, observant, refusing to play your old roles, the storm passes faster than either of you expected. Ever noticed how arguments snowball the moment both people start over-explaining? One sharp comment leads to a paragraph of justifications, which sparks a novel-length rebuttal, until you're both exhausted and can't even remember the original issue. That's where Musonius Rufus, the Stoic teacher who trained Epictetus, drops a truth bomb. Excess speech fuels fire. Not just metaphorically, neuroscience backs this. When emotions run high, the brain's prefrontal cortex, the rational part, literally gets hijacked by the amygdala, the alarm system. Every extra word you toss into that biochemical storm is like throwing kindling on a blaze. Temperance in words isn't about withholding its strategic silence with surgical precision. Picture this: she's upset because you forgot your anniversary dinner. The untrained response, a flood of excuses: work was crazy, my phone died, I've been stressed. The Stoic move: pause, then offer one concise acknowledgement: I messed up. That must have hurt, full stop. No rambling defense, no over-explaining that accidentally shifts blame. If you just reminded me. Musonius called verbose justifications the perfume of guilt. They don't cover the stench, they just make it harder to pinpoint. Brevity forces you to sit with the discomfort of being wrong, which paradoxically speeds resolution. Here's why less works better. In conflict, the brain craves resolution like sugar, and lengthy explanations feel satisfying in the moment, like you're doing something. But to the listener, they register as evasion. Think of a child caught with a broken vase. It fell, the dog barked, the shelf was wobbly. The more details stack up, the shakier the story feels. Adults aren't so different. Her intuition picks up on verbal clutter as insecurity, not sincerity. Contrast that with the disarming power of a simple "you're right. I'll fix this." Fewer syllables, heavier impact. The Stoics took this further with premeditatio verborum, premeditating your words like a general planning battle dispatches. Before entering charged conversations, they'd rehearse responses stripped to their essence. Marcus Aurelius would draft letters to contentious senators, then slash half the sentences. Why? Because emotion dilutes meaning. What feels necessary to say in anger often only prolongs the wound. Try this tonight. Next time she's upset, imagine your words cost $1,000 each. Suddenly, I hear you becomes priceless. While let me explain why your overreacting seems like bankruptcy. But temperance isn't just about cutting words, it's about weighting them. Seneca wrote that speech should be like coins, few and precious. When she's emotional, one loaded sentence, "I see this matters deeply to you," carries more healing than a monologue. It's the difference between tossing a life preserver and drowning her in a flood of your own anxiety. Even apologies gain power through restraint. "I failed you" lands harder than a 5-minute soliloquy peppered with buts and ifs. The ultimate test: replace explaining with asking. When tension flares, swap your paragraphs for a single question. What do you need most right now? This forces her brain to switch from emotional venting to problem solving, a neurochemical shift that cools fiery emotions faster than your rebuttals ever could. Musonius knew this millennia before MRI machines. The tongue's worst sin isn't lying, it's smothering the truth under an avalanche of words. So when the heat rises, remember, the quieter you become, the more she can hear. Morning light hasn't even touched the window yet, but your mind is already racing, anticipating her mood, bracing for potential storms. Here's where the Stoics flipped the script. They didn't wait for chaos to strike. They preempted it with rituals so simple, they'd fit between your alarm clock and first sip of coffee. Seneca, the philosopher who navigated Nero's court without losing his soul, dedicated the first hour of every day to what he called meditatio, a mental rehearsal of the emotional hurdles ahead. Not grim pessimism, but strategic clarity. Picture this: before your feet even hit the floor, you whisper to the darkness, "Today, I'll meet her emotions with patience, not resistance. If she snaps, I'll listen. If she withdraws, I'll hold space." That's not a hopeful wish, it's armor forged before battle. Seneca's journals reveal a man who treated mornings like a general's war room. He'd visualize insults, setbacks, even betrayals, not to dwell on them, but to drain their shock value. Apply this to her moods. Spend 3 minutes at dawn mentally walking through her toughest emotional patterns. See her stressed after work, overwhelmed by the kids, picking a fight over nothing. Now watch yourself in that scene, responding with steady calm. This isn't magic, it's muscle memory. Neuroscience confirms that mental rehearsal primes the same neural pathways as physical practice. When the real moment comes, your brain recognizes the terrain. We've trained for this. The brilliance of this ritual lies in its simplicity. No apps, no incense, just a silent conversation with your future self. Marcus Aurelius framed it as a question: what's in my control today? Not her mood, not her tone, but your own sovereignty. Try scripting your morning mantra like a Stoic contract. If she's distant, I won't chase. If she's sharp, I'll breathe before replying. My peace isn't hostage to her weather. Write it on your bathroom mirror. Whisper it while the kettle boils. These words become the guardrails that keep you from veering into reactive territory when emotions run high. But here's where most men sabotage themselves. They confuse ritual with rigidity. The goal isn't to predict every scenario like some emotional chess master. It's to cultivate a default setting of groundedness. Epictetus compared it to an archer's preparation. You can't control the wind, but you can straighten your arrow and firm your stance. Your morning meditation is that stance. When her storm hits, you're not scrambling for composure. You're accessing a calm you planted hours earlier. Practical tip: pair this mental rehearsal with a physical anchor. The Stoics often used elemental triggers, a splash of cold water to symbolize resilience, the grip of a pen to embody focus. Try pressing your palm to your chest as you recite your intention, feeling the heartbeat beneath. This somatic link etches the ritual deeper, so when tension flares later, that same touch can recall your morning resolve. Seneca would end his reflections by asking, "What's the worst that could happen today?" Then he'd smile, knowing he'd already survived it in his mind. The real power of this practice: over time, you'll notice something startling. Her roller coaster hasn't changed, but your seatbelt has. Where once her frown ruined your morning, now it's just a curve you've learned to lean into. Not because you've numbed yourself, but because you've already walked this path in the quiet dawn, when the world was still soft and your will was yours alone. And that's the secret Seneca knew. Mornings don't belong to the world's demands. They're the proving ground where you forge the calm that outlasts every storm. Evening reviews aren't just about tallying wins and losses. They're excavations of the moments where Stoic theory collided with real life. Picture this: the day's over, the lights are low, and instead of mindlessly scrolling, you're holding a pen over a notebook asking one brutal question: where did I let her mood dictate mine today? The Stoics called this examen a nightly audit borrowed from their slave-turned-teacher Epictetus, who demanded his students dissect their days like surgeons. What weakened you? What strengthened you? Where did you mistake control for surrender? This isn't self-judgment, it's strategic reconnaissance. That moment she snapped about the messy kitchen, did you react with calm deflection or silent resentment? When she withdrew after work, did you respect the silence or pester her with anxious questions? The review exposes the gap between who you aspire to be and who her emotions revealed you to be in the heat of the moment. Modern psychology validates what the Stoics knew: reflection consolidates learning. Neuroscientists call it memory reconsolidation, the process where reviewing an experience rewires your brain to handle it better next time. Your evening review is the forge where raw reactions are hammered into deliberate responses. Try this template. Divide your page into 3 columns: event, reaction, Stoic alternative. In the first, jot the facts: she criticized my driving. In the second, record your unfiltered response: defensive tone, pointed out her bad navigation. But the third column is where the alchemy happens. Channel Marcus Aurelius. What would the ideal version of me have done here? Maybe it's listened without rebuttal, then joked about GPS failures. The goal isn't self-flagellation, it's pattern recognition. Over weeks, you'll spot your Achilles heels, perhaps defensiveness flares when she critiques in public, or impatience peaks when she's indecisive. These aren't flaws, they're your training schedule. The review's power lies in its specificity. Generic "I should have been" common notes are useless. Stoic precision looks like at 7:15 p.m. When she sighed about the laundry, I rolled my eyes instead of asking if work was stressful. That time-stamped honesty does two things. It anchors the lesson in a concrete moment, and it forces you to confront the tiny pivots where your relationship's emotional tone shifts. Seneca's letters reveal he did this daily, recounting even how he'd handled a servant's mistake or a friend's snub. Why? Because Stoicism isn't a philosophy of grand gestures. It's the art of micro-resistance against petty reactions. Here's the twist: include your victories too. Note where you did pause before reacting, where you did offer empathy instead of solutions. These bright spots reinforce neural pathways, making them more accessible in future storms. Epictetus advised, celebrate the small obediences to reason as diligently as you mourn the lapses. Maybe today you caught yourself mirroring her tense posture and deliberately relaxed your shoulders. That's not a minor win, it's proof you're rewriting reflexes. Close each review with a single intention for tomorrow. Not a vague "be better," but a targeted "when she complains about dinner, I'll respond with what would make tonight easier for you." This stamps Stoic theory onto real-world scenarios, transforming abstract principles into muscle memory. The ancients knew wisdom without action is dead. Your evening review is the bridge between them, a daily ritual where you're both student and sculptor, chiseling away the reactive self to reveal the unshakable one beneath. Imagine turning her emotional waves from something you weather alone into a ritual you navigate together, where Stoicism becomes your shared language rather than your solo lifeline. History remembers the porch stoa in Greek, where Zeno taught not as a solitary think tank, but as a gathering place where partners like Cotto and his wife Marcia practiced philosophy side by side. This is the untapped power of Way 24, transforming emotional turbulence from a divisive force into connective tissue by adopting shared Stoic practices. Start with synchronized breathwork, not as some new age gimmick, but as an ancient reset button. Picture this: after a tense exchange, instead of retreating to separate corners, you say, "Let's pause for 3 breaths." Then, facing each other, you inhale for 4 counts, hold for 4, exhale for 6, matching rhythm like oarsmen rowing the same boat. The Stoics knew this synchrony had neurological superpowers. Modern science confirms it now. When 2 people breathe in unison, their heart rates in train, creating a biological bridge that bypasses surface-level conflict. It's not about who's right, but about literally getting on the same wavelength. Take it deeper with shared journaling, modeled after the hypnomata memory aids couples like Marcus Aurelius and Faustina used. Keep a joint notebook where you each answer 3 nightly questions. Where did we both show strength today? What tested our patience? How can we better anchor each other tomorrow? This isn't complaint swapping, it's collaborative pattern recognition. When her moods feel less like personal grenades and more like shared puzzles to solve together, the entire dynamic shifts from adversarial to allied. The Stoics elevated even meals into training grounds. Musonius Rufus taught that eating simply, shared olives and bread instead of lavish feasts, cultivated appreciation for presence over performance. Apply this by instituting a no devices, no distractions rule for 1 meal daily, using the time to practice active listening. When she vents about work, resist problem solving. Mirror back what you heard instead so your boss took credit again. That'd make anyone furious. This mirrors the Acros's deep listening exercises Stoic students performed in pairs, where the goal wasn't rebuttal but reflection. Here's the clincher: study philosophy together. Ancient texts describe couples like Aurea and Petrus reading Epictetus aloud by lamplight, dissecting passages as a team. Choose one Stoic paragraph weekly, perhaps Seneca's on anger, and debate its application over wine. How would this look if I snapped about chores? How could we reinterpret this for your stress spirals? This transforms abstract principles into your private code, a relational shorthand that cuts through emotional static. When she sighs, I'm just venting, not problem solving, and you nod, Seneca's letter 13. You've built a bridge no argument can fully burn. The brilliance lies in reciprocity. These practices aren't you managing her emotions, they're you both acknowledging emotions as shared weather systems to observe and navigate. Like two sailors tying their vessels together in a storm, the lashings may creak under tension, but neither ship founders alone. That's the gift of shared stoicism. Her roller coaster stops being her problem to regulate and becomes your collective curriculum for growth. And in that shift, even the rockiest emotional seas become navigable, not because the waves calm, but because you've learned to ride them tandem. Love isn't something that happens to you, it's something you choose again and again, especially when her emotions make that choice feel impossible. Here's the Stoic twist most people miss. Commitment isn't a one-time vow, it's 1,000 tiny renewals, a daily recalibration of why you're here. Think of it like tending a fire. The initial spark might have been passion, but what keeps it alive isn't magic. It's the deliberate act of adding wood, adjusting the logs, shielding the flames from the wind. Her moods, they're just weather, your choice to love through them, that's the hearth. Epictetus, who watched marriages crumble under the weight of unmet expectations, put it bluntly, love is a verb. Not a fuzzy feeling that comes and goes, but a series of actions you take regardless of the emotional forecast. When she's distant, love looks like giving space without resentment. When she's raging, it's listening without retaliating. Even when her words sting, love means separating the wound from the weapon, recognizing that her lashing out is often just pain in disguise. The Stoics didn't romanticize relationships, they fortified them. Marcus Aurelius wrote love letters to his wife Faustina, not when she was charming, but when their marriage was politically strained and personally exhausting. This is the work, he reminded himself, not the fantasy. Here's the shift that changes everything. Most men think love is a noun, a static thing you either have or lose based on her behavior. The Stoic redefines it as a practice, like archery or meditation. You don't stop meditating because your mind wanders, you gently return to the breath. Similarly, you don't withdraw love because she's difficult. You return to the fundamentals: patience, empathy, the quiet decision to see her humanity before her flaws. Try this reframe when she's emotionally volatile. Instead of thinking, why is she like this? Ask, how can I love her through this? That slight pivot transforms her outburst from relationship taxes to training weights, building your capacity for unconditional presence. The ancient Stoics would host banquets where they'd practice loving difficult guests, not to preach tolerance, but to stress test their principles. Apply that to your relationship. Her mood swings aren't inconveniences, they're your banquet invitations. Every time you choose kindness when she's prickly or patience when she's irrational, you're not just managing her emotions, you're mastering the art of loving as a verb. And here's the secret: when she senses your commitment isn't contingent on her behavior, her storms often lose their edge. Not because you manipulated her, but because you've become the safe harbor that makes raging seas unnecessary. So tonight, as you lie beside her, whether she's warm or withdrawn, whisper Epictetus words like a mantra. Love is a verb, then live that truth in the smallest moments. The way you hand her the coffee mug she likes without being asked. How you pause your podcast to hear her vent about her boss. Even the silent, deep breath you take when a criticism lands too sharp. These aren't concessions, they're the daily reps of a practice far older than romance. Love isn't something you fall into, it's something you do. And when you do it relentlessly, you'll find the roller coaster wasn't an obstacle to love, it was the very terrain where love learned to walk. Think of Stoicism as your emotional umbrella. Not one that hides you from the storm, but one that lets you walk through it without getting drenched. After all, handling her emotional roller coaster isn't about avoiding the ride. It's about keeping your balance no matter how wild the twists and turns get. These 25 Stoic ways, they're the ribs of that umbrella, each one reinforcing your ability to stay dry in the downpour. Whether it's the grounding breathwork of cleans, the preemptive calm of premeditatio malorum, or the disarming humor of Marcus Aurelius, every technique is a spoke holding up your serenity. Now, you don't need to master all 25 at once. That's not how umbrellas or Stoicism work. You start with one sturdy rib. Maybe today, it's the 3-second pause before reacting. Tomorrow, it's shifting to a third-person perspective when tensions flare. The key is picking one and wielding it until it feels less like a tool and more like an extension of who you are. So tell me in the comments which of these ways jumps out at you. Is it the journaling practice that turns chaos into clarity, or the Amor Fati mindset that helps you embrace even the messiest moments? Drop a number and let's compare notes, and if you're ready to go deeper, to build an entire toolkit that keeps you steady no matter how hard the emotional winds blow, hit subscribe. This isn't just about surviving her moods, it's about thriving in them, because the real magic of Stoicism, it doesn't just weather storms, it teaches you to dance in the rain. So grab your umbrella, the forecast is looking a lot brighter from here.